Hello, come on in. It's the Holy Hour Podcast, the All Cure Podcast. I'm Gavin. Thanks so much for joining us. If you've been wondering, why isn't there just a podcast where somebody talks about the cure, like nonstop? Well, that's pretty much what's going on over here. So, guess what? You found us, and here we are. So we're here for the next hour, gonna hopefully fill your cure talk needs for the next 2 weeks. And then if that isn't enough, maybe you missed an episode. Go back. We're cranking into the 50s at this point. So lots of hours of cure talk. And we're so happy you could join us if you haven't already been joining us. We got a great show for you today. This is one that Donald and I pretty much was on the main list of like, well, can we make a cure podcast? What would be some of the topics we could talk about? And one of the initial topics is kind of an easy, obvious one. But then once we started really looking at it, we're like, we got to do this right. And it's the idea of doing other projects, side projects, and just things that members of the Cure have worked on over the years. Before the Cure, during the Cure, after the Cure. There's been a lot of members of the Cure, and they've all kind of gone on to do side stuff or other stuff after they've left the band. And so a lot of these are bands that you've heard the names over and over, but you know, even myself, I didn't really dig into a lot of these bands. You kind of hear them on initial, hey, guess what? Perry's playing in this band, and then you kind of hear it, and you're like, yeah, cool, but you don't really dig in a lot of times, you know? So I thought maybe now's a good time to just dive headfirst into this rabbit hole and see what's up. So some of these might be, you know, refresher for some people. You're like, yes, obviously. Or maybe some of you guys didn't know about some of these things. So I'm going to play a few little snippets from some. Maybe you can get a little taste of if you think it's worth pursuing. Most of these are out there somewhere. But if you dig around, you should be able to find it. I'll try to put as many links in the Facebook thread as possible so you can track it down too. But we thought it would be great to just kind of examine what life outside of the Cure is really like for a lot of these members, and what other projects they've worked on to see if the Cure sound carries over. And so not a very Robert heavy episode for once. And I guess as the official disclaimer for this episode, this is exactly the kind of episode that Donald and I did not want to try to do very often on this show, because it is very history, or I'm just kind of spouting off little facts and tidbits here and there, and some dates and such, like song titles and albums and when they came out. And inevitably, there's gonna be some shit that I screw up here. There's just no way. You know, this isn't my college thesis here. I just spent, you know, a couple days researching some of this stuff. A lot of it I already knew from the books and such, but at the same time, I really wanted to dig in to get enough research behind it, or I can piece all of it together, hopefully in an accurate, coherent way. But at the same time, there's going to be some stuff that I just forget about to mention, or I'm a little slip up on or something. So, with that in mind, keep my perspective in gear, because there's a lot of shit to cover here. And secondly, I totally welcome suggestions or corrections. So be sure to hit us up on the Facebook thread or on Instagram if you catch something, because I'd like to know too. But, you know, just don't be fucking vicious about it, okay? Which nobody has been. We've been very fortunate. People are very nice when we do get corrected on things. And just last episode, we had John on Instagram remind us that we had been talking about influences and a connection between Depeche Mode and The Cure, and Donald and I kind of glossed over that and said, yeah, hard to say if there's any real connection, and totally slipped my mind that Daryl Bamonte was a road manager and did a lot of work with Depeche Mode, so obviously a huge factor in bridging The Cure and Depeche Mode as far as acquaintances anyway. Yeah, so that's exactly the kind of creative input we were looking for from our listeners, so thanks so much to John. And again, once again, if this happens, which it's bound to in this episode, feel free to do the same. And of course, opinions are going to vary. You know, some of these bands, a lot of these bands and projects aren't exactly my favorite, you know, like, you know, they're good songs, but just because you love The Cure doesn't mean you have to love everything they put out, and past members, current members put out. So, something to take with a grain of salt. Doesn't mean that you're not going to love it. So I'm just trying to, once again, bring awareness to these projects. So speaking of the Bamonte brothers and Daryl, and we figured a great way to start off this episode would be with Perry, because I also happened to get an email this week from a listener named Matt, who has also sent in a cool segment about Wild Mood Swings, but we're sitting on that one until we talk about Wild Mood Swings. But he threw us a cool little segment of just Perry love in general, and he's like, you know what? Seems like Perry isn't really getting love and recognition or credit that he deserves as being a long-term member of The Cure and really doing a great job while he was in The Cure. You can always praise Perry. I think it's a soft spot in every Cure fan's heart is Perry, and I don't think it'd be pretty hard to find somebody out there that's a Cure fan that would want to talk trash about Perry. Musicianship, or especially as a person. It seems like with every cool fan story about The Cure, especially from about his reign there of 96 through, before 96, right? Let's see, what was he in The Cure? About 90 to 2005, so a good chunk of time there. And it just seems like he was always such a really sweet and genuine dude to Cure fans, and I think he's a huge part of their sound of just like being able to fit in and cover the parts of songs that were there before him, but also adding an extra touch to it that a lot of the members maybe haven't done quite as well as him. So who knows? Maybe he does deserve a little more praise than he gets. But I think he's an awesome musician. I love his style and just everything he brought to the band. And again, like everyone else, I think he just seemed like such a cool dude. But yeah, before we dive into Matt's segment, which it's always fun just to hear some Perry praise, I thought we could talk about one of his side projects that just actually came up in the most relevant recent Cure news, is that he might be back in this band. So he put out an album with the band, Love Amongst Ruin, and they had some previous work, I believe, but this album I just wanted to focus on because it's the one that Perry plays bass on, and it's called Lose Your Way, and it came out in 2015, and it's really cool. And I initially listened to it around 2015 and was like, yeah, it's cool, but didn't really grab my attention. And it's kind of a weird thing about this album is that it doesn't really jump out in like a super catchy songwriting way. It's cool and it rocks, so you like it on initial listen, but didn't really hold my attention so much. But I didn't really give it enough listens. And for the sake of this episode, I really dug in, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. I really dug it on this listen. Some of the songs were starting to seep in a little bit better, and it's a diverse album, the fact that there's a lot of songs that could sound like just the same old stuff, but they take on a lot of different cool angles of the songwriting and just the way it was recorded. It's very rockin'. Like, it sounds strange, and to some people this might be blasphemy, I don't know, but like it actually was fairly reminiscent of the later the two solo albums that Johnny Marr's put out. I felt in style. It's very like has like the big kind of rock hooks. The vocals are cool, but they're not quite there. Maybe in the style of a Johnny Marr, where you could tell it's not their main deal. And just for further noting with this band, the other thing aside from having Perry on bass, which is super cool, the drummer is the drummer from Placebo. If you remember Placebo. Cool band from the early 2000s, and who also had some crossover with The Cure. And I initially thought that he just played drums in this band too. I didn't realize he was the actual singer too. So I think on the recordings for this, he plays the drums and does the singing and guitars. But from the live clips I saw, he's just singing. He's not pulling a Don Henley or anything where he's trying to sing from behind the drum kit. But you could tell he's just awesome musician and has a cool voice, but it's not super in your face like a dude that's, the vocals are his main thing, you can tell. So, of course, the slow jam was the one that caught my ear. Here's a little snippet. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, how do you sleep with the notion Yeah, that song's called Oh God, and it's probably not the one that would grab anyone else's attention from the album, but again, the preference thing coming in, I just love the way that it builds and has like a lot of the aspects that I love in a song. So I think the takeaway is more that it's a more peppy rockin' album. So a lot of cool guitar stuff going on that's a little more reminiscent of Placebo and such. So check it out. I think even if you listened to it when it initially came out and it didn't quite catch your ear, I think it's worth another shot. Out of pretty much all the ones that we're about to talk about, I think this might be the one that I would more openly come back to and listen to in a non just because of Cure members in it way. So for what it's worth, I think Losing Your Way, Love Amongst Ruin is worth checking out for sure. And he left, I guess, after this, or maybe he was just filling in for that album and wasn't really meant to be a permanent thing. But there was a quick note recently that he is going to be playing with them again, so it sounds like it might be popping up again, and I would definitely go see these guys live. It seems like a really cool live show, probably. So if anybody out there has seen them live, let me know how it works. Was it cool? And before we get into some more relevant and current Perry news, let's take that quick moment here to listen to what Matt has to say about Perry in general, and let's give some props to Perry real quick.
Hey, Gavin and Donald, it's Matt again. Driving home from work yet again, and I wanted to contribute something to the podcast that I don't believe has been really talked much about before. I'm going to keep it as brief and succinct as I possibly can, and I'd like to share my thoughts on Perry MgMt, because in the Cure community, a lot of people still really talk or like to analyze the input and contributions from Lowell, from Boris, from Pearl, but I don't really hear a lot of people talk about Perry and his tenure and what he brought to the group. So hopefully quickly I'd like to talk about a little anecdote that I had involving him, and then my overall thoughts on his tenure with the group. So around 10 years or so, I had Facebook, like most people. And I think through reading the Chain of Flowers website, someone had mentioned that Perry's on Facebook. So this would have been, a year or 2 or 3 years after he was no longer in the group. So I wanted to, I added him as a friend, and to my surprise, he added me back, and this little window was opened up, and I suddenly had kind of a small glimpse into this guy's life. He was posting at the time, nothing really music or Cure related, but he posted some pictures of his vacations and his horses and his estate, which is beautiful. And I like that, and I did not want to be one of those obsessive, crazy fans that starts asking him, hey, what was that part you played on Trust? Did you use a Roland? Yeah, I don't want to do that. I just kind of wanted to get in there, kind of gradually. But I did have a question I really wanted to ask him about Wish. And this was at the same time I was really fascinated by the record, specifically the record we could have gotten. And by that I mean going back to interviews around that time, it was planned as a double record with the second half being instrumentals. And I was curious to what happened to that. I know we got a few with the Lost Wishes, but as the further I dove into this, I started finding some kind of peculiar things. There was an interview with Dave Allen, the producer, who, and this is nothing salacious, I'm not trying to start any rumors, gossip, I hate all that stuff, but he basically said that the mix that we got in 1992, he doesn't believe was the mix that he made for the record. And this is all like archived information. It was on a radio interview. I would check it out on a Chain of Flowers deep dive if you have the time. So I thought that was interesting that they hired him, and he even said he had a little brief falling out with Robert, and just that he was the hired gun and they didn't end up using his mix. And then thirdly, another piece of the puzzle was the April 92 issue of Spin magazine posted their review of Wish. And the reviewer said his favorite song, or one of his favorite songs on the record, was The Big Hand. But, as you know, we didn't get that on our commercially released version of Wish that we all got in April 92. So that was a little curious to me, and it just seemed to an outsider that this project started off as something completely different from what we got, and I was just curious that the decisions that went into it and how we ended up with what we have. And I talked about this on my Wild Mood Swings thought that The Cure in the 90s, I think, had some stumblings, for lack of a better word. Like, they were just trying to find their footing in a little bit of a changing, musical atmosphere. And then you go back to the Play Out, those versions that are on Play Out, like Cut, which, just sounds radically different. Wendy Time sounds different. Just so fascinating that we had that in whatever. Okay, so anyways, long story short. So then I'm friends with Perry. And I don't want to embarrass myself and be a nerdy fan and that stuff. So I'm waiting it out, and he doesn't really post much about The Cure. I want to give these guys privacy. And then one night, and I know this would have been around 2008 or so, he made a post saying, I just finished watching Trilogy for the first time. Pretty good if I do say so myself. And I just so happened to be on the computer when he made that, a few minutes before. And then right away, the fans were chiming in on their things, and I was like, okay, here's my entry here. I'm gonna do a little brief compliment and maybe a question attached to it. We'll see how it goes. So I said, yeah, thanks for Trilogy. I really love the Bloodflowers portion. What was the guitar you used on 39? I really like that song. And truthfully, I don't care about what guitar was used on 39, but I thought that might be a little way to kind of like maybe he would take the bait. So he did, and he responded, and that was cool. And then I'm like, okay, well now he has a little face to the name. And then I think I waited an hour because he was still taking, or at this point, he had never really taken a lot of questions about The Cure, and rightfully so. Why would he have to? Why should he? And all I could come up with, this is so stupid, but I just said, hey, what was your reaction to hearing Ross Robinson was going to produce the 2004 self-titled, or something like that? I don't know why I said that, but I don't know. Just put it out there. Didn't get a reply. A few days went by, I checked back, nothing, and then sure enough, like a week or two later, dropped as a friend. So that was my brief interaction with Perry. But it was really cool seeing all his pictures, his guitars, his memorabilia that he had collected over the years. And he just seemed like a very, very friendly, nice guy that didn't have to talk to anyone, but he did, and that was really cool. And now, just quickly, I want to give my thoughts on his input to the group. So I will say my favorite incarnation of The Cure is that post-disintegration lineup through Wish, where they had Perry as a utility guy, where he was playing keys and also acted as the third guitar. And that stuff, man, like if you listen to any of the live recording show Paris, any of the 92 bootlegs, 91, there was just something about that lineup. I don't know, they're just locked in. And his strengths were really magnified. Two quick examples with the keyboards I'll say where I believe I will say right now, he's not a better, and he'd probably admit this too, not a better keyboardist than Roger. Roger's a certified genius as far as I'm concerned, but the tones he used and not embellishing and not using a lot of flourishes, I think really paid off on some of the older songs. Like if you listen to Charlotte Sometimes, to my ears, I think that's going to be the best live version you'll ever hear, is that 92 Paris version, where when Roger plays it now, and this is not a knock on him, there's just a lot of flourish on it, and the tone that he chooses is a little bit different than the recorded version, where it sounds a little more cheesy and 80s-ish than I'd like. But he's more of a virtuoso, so he's gonna play that way. Another kind of quote simple song I thought he really nailed the tone of was The Walk. Like there's this 92 bootleg I listen to. I think it's called. I think it might just be called Friday I'm in Love. I'm gonna have to look it up and get back to you. But it's a soundboard bootleg like early on in the Wish tour from England, and just the tone he uses. He uses the correct period piece tone for those older songs. Like Dressing Up, he nailed really well. And then on the guitar front, it was great hearing him on Open, getting that third guitar in there, the iteration of cut that they were playing on show was really good. I think it really benefits from having that extra guitar in there. Gives it a little more edge. So yeah, I thought that was the perfect fit for him, so to speak. And then with that reconfigured lineup in '96, I think that, reading, I'm kind of jumping around, but I just read this interview with Jason for this French drum magazine where he says that Robert really dictates the pace of the live songs, the backing tracks, and the tempo they use. Where Jason said that, it kind of sounds like he says he's limited to what he can do because Robert controls all that. And I think when you look at those live songs from '96 until all the way up till when he last played with the group, 2004, 2005, that having him locked into that click track, I don't think was the best. And this is not an indictment on him as a guitar player, as his actual ability, but I think like listening to him try to play Why Can't I Be You, he couldn't really nail that staccato, but I think he could if they're either in a faster tempo or he can kind of break out the click track a little bit, you know what I mean? And then also, going back to, I really liked I think to this day he played the Just Like Kevin guitar lick better than Pearl or Reeves. I really believe he just got that flow of that. So that's kind of my take on him. I think he's just kind of a forgotten guy, a very polite and nice, humble guy. And this came up because I saw he's auctioning off a bunch of guitars, so I hope he does what Lowell did and can autograph a few things and bust out some memorabilia. But I don't know. I just think he is kind of a sometimes forgotten figure in Cure history, and he should be recognized as a dude who really brought it in the early 90s and still made some good contributions. I know he wrote Anniversary on the self-titled album, and that's probably I agree with you, Gavin, probably one of the only bright spots on that thing. So that's my take on Perry Belmonte. Thanks for the podcast, guys. Doing great work. Keep it up, and talk to you later.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt. I pretty much agree with you all the way around on there. Some really great points about his playing and just being an all-around solid dude for sure. If you didn't quite catch what he just said, what was that? Perry's auctioning off some of his... a lot of his guitars and everything from guitars and bass guitars, and they had been on hold, but the auction's coming up early September, I believe, and it's just pulling up the webpage, and it looks like they've actually got stuff posted now. It looks like the auction's going to be on September 14th on Thursday. Guitar auctions on, let's see what the name of this thing is, but I'll put a link to it in the Facebook page. It's all over like Chain of Flowers too, of course. And yeah, somewhat surprisingly, they're actually starting out at somewhat affordable prices. They didn't seem too absurd coming out of the gates, at least. I'm sure it'll blow up pretty crazy once the auction gets rolling, but it'll be interesting to see because there are a pretty good assortment of like his custom-made Schecter guitars. There's a couple of those on there, and then everything from that to like just a Yamaha bass, So even if you're just a collector with some extra cash out there, it'd be pretty sweet to grab one of these. And even cooler if you're a musician and just want to have a little Perry power behind your next guitar. Check it out. You might be able to actually swing one of these as opposed to the Pearl auction that went a few years back, where I remember that got pretty insane quick. I was like, man, that'd be cool just to have a little teeny piece of art. I was like, nope, not in my budget, but good for them. I'm glad that they're able to crank out some cash on these kind of things. So, but yeah, so go check it out. September 14th is when it all goes down, apparently. So moving on from Perry, let's see, where's the next logical start? Let's just jump all the way back to where we probably should have started, but we wanted to give Perry some love. Let's start with Lowell. There's been a lot of press on Lowell lately, and we were all pretty familiar because he just put out his book, Cured. So one of his side projects for sure now that he's got a new path as an author, and a lot of cool things on the horizon we learned from his book tours and such that he's going to keep that rolling. He's got another book in mind and a graphic novel apparently where Pearl's doing the illustrations on it, and the big news being the movie. They're making a Cured movie, so who knows where that... I mean, I guess if he was talking about it, it's pretty official, but it's going to be crazy. Can you imagine? What is that? It's going to be so weird to see what kind of backing, or if it's going to be like a super indie movie or something that's a huge release or not. But send me your thoughts. Who should play Lowell and Robert in the movie? That's always a fun question. Dangerous territory, Lowell, but I'll watch it. That's for sure. So music-wise, though, let's go back to Lowell left The Cure 89, right before the release of Disintegration, if you weren't following along all those years. And, a lot going on in Lowell's life. You can read in his book around that time. But musically, he joined the band Presence right around then, which is an interesting band in itself. The album that I focused on was called Inside, and it came out in 93, so roughly around, post-Wish parallel. But yeah, it's Gary Biddles. I believe I'm pronouncing his name right, but he's one of these dudes that's just been around in Cure history all over the place. And I guess he started out as a roadie with the Cure, and I was even mixing him up with Billy McKenzie, a lot of the associates. But he's the dude that's just kind of in all those early stories from the Cure, and just a good friend of the band, I guess. And he's the infamous one that sang the last, encore song of the Pornography tour when everything had imploded, and they did the Death to the Cure song, and Robert was playing drums, and this guy Barry was singing the crazy vocals, and everybody was playing the wrong instruments, and but a mess. I'll put a link to that too if you haven't heard that. But anyway, this guy Gary Biddles, will pop up, and again, this band Presence is the second kind of incarnation of his work. Fool's Dance, which we'll talk about later with Simon, is his other band. So he's the vocalist for these bands, and so it's kind of the always taking the B team in a sense of Cure members when they're not in the Cure. And I don't love Presence so much. I've been trying for years to get into this album, and don't love it. It's just they're weird in the sense that the early 90s stuff doesn't work for the sound. It's not terrible, but it just doesn't really grab me. I couldn't really get into it. So I'll have more pleasant things to say about Gary's band Fool's Dance when we talk about Simon in a second. But as far as Lowell, hard to say what he was even doing in his book. Even it sounded like his role was pretty minimal there, because he was going through his own problems, of course, and around that time frame, with the court stuff and the alcoholism and the whole mess. But so it's hard to say how much he could really even be associated. But that was interesting that even when a lot of Cure members leave the band, or for whatever reason, or are not in the band, there's kind of this incestuous kind of sub-tier that all these bands kind of had these crossovers. So it's a smaller knit group of friends than you would initially think. So it's pretty cool when you see like, oh wow, all the little crossovers even on the minute levels of these bands. And so that's Gary's band, and Lowell played in keyboards for them on the album Inside. And then Leavenhurst is his other main thing that he plays with his wife, and the combination of their names there. And they've put out a few albums. I looked at the two, House by the Sea and Blue Star in particular. And I like Blue Star a lot better because there's actual live drums a lot more on that. And some of the songs have more of a Lowell feel on drums, which is kind of cool to hear in something outside of the Cure. House by the Sea uses more loops and keys and such, and again has cool stuff. Song wise, I just feel like the writing isn't quite there. Not enough to really grab me. His wife has cool voice, but not super unique in my opinion, and it just doesn't really blow me away. But at the same time, nothing that you can really say to bash it. It's just nothing that really grabs my attention. But definitely worth checking out. Of the two, I'd recommend Blue Star a little more. That one I liked a little bit more. Here's a quick snippet of a song from that.
The story plays out.
move on to Simon Gallup. This guy has been the touchstone for Robert Smith for years, the core of the band, as you say. But there were two little blips of time that he was not in the Cure. Right after Pornography, around 83, when they had their falling out. He'd come back by 85 for Head on the Door. But in that period of time, he, going back to what I just said about Gary Biddles, had an original band called Fool's Dance, and Simon played bass for that. And I initially, I've heard this in terrible MP3 format throughout the years. They would pop up and I'd give it another chance, and it's always kind of but this time it actually hit me a little bit more. Like, I dug it a bit. Maybe it's just it has a very distinct like 80s vibe to it in a cool way. That's just, I don't know, this time around I liked it a lot more. Still nothing like the songwriting wise didn't really blow me away. And the bass though is pretty amazing. That bass, just knowing it's Simon probably helps, but at the same time, some of these sound like, they could be Cure songs. If Robert just sang over it, it would just be, very Cure similar, even though he's not note-wise doing anything super amazing, but you can definitely hear Simon's style in the songs. And they put out 2 EPs. One was just called Fool's Dance, and the other one was They'll Never Know. And I kind of like the first one better, just the self-titled. I think it came out before it. I could be wrong there. But it's pretty cool. Some of them just have like a cool, even when they bring in the sax and stuff, it sounds kind of that era of the Cure, or, like Splinter in Her Head and stuff like that, where it's like got some cool Cure vibes going on. And I felt like Gary was singing more in a Robert style maybe on these recordings than he would later do in Presence. And while I didn't like the 80s or the 90s kind of feel of Presence, I think the 80s feel of Fool's Dance works to their advantage. It totally sounds like in an 80s movie when they go into like a nightclub and it's just some generic band up on the stage, but it has like a cool sound. It sounds like it could be one of these. Here's a snippet of the one I liked in particular. So that one's called Saha. I don't know if that's shorthand for something I'm totally missing or blanking out on at the moment, but it's a cool song. So yeah, I'd check those out. They're probably floating around. We'll put links up on the Facebook thread for those too, so you can hear them in their entirety. And I know vinyl-wise, you can get some of these too, which are cool collectibles to get Simon playing on that. And worth noting that Simon actually sings lead vocals on a song called The Ring that's on the They'll Never Know EP. Pretty cool. Song's just not that great, but yeah, he does a good job. But cool thing too with Fool's Dance, at one point Matthew from earlier around 17 Seconds era from The Cure also plays some keys on one of these EPs, so that's kind of cool. Again, with that idea of this kind of JV League Cure or something, which sounds a little insulting maybe, but it's weird and cool that there's like this little floating area of Cure members that come in and out of each other's lives in different bands even. And along those lines, the next member, Michael Dempsey, the original bass player for The Cure, that other little blip of time that Simon was not in the band. The very first album, Three Imaginary Boys, was not Simon. It was Michael Dempsey, and he left after that album around 1980 and started playing with the Associates, which is a band that has a huge crossover with The Cure too. But strangely enough, Michael Dempsey's other noteworthy projects were also in Presence, before Lowell was in Presence, but after Simon was in Fool's Dance. Whew. You got all this? You taking this down? You got pen and paper? It might help. We should make like a tree, a family tree or something. But anyway, so more just to prove my point of that weird crossover of these. And sadly, Gary Biddles, though, the front man of these two bands that we're talking about mostly, passed away in 2013. I didn't quite figure out the full story of why or how, but had to have been fairly close to at least some of these members of The Cure. So sorry to hear that. But yeah, it was a good batch there of recordings that they're very Cure member heavy. And let's pop on a little further down the line now, maybe around 1983. Andy, remember Andy Anderson? Yeah, drummer. Played on The Glove. He played on Love Cat, some Japanese Whispers stuff, and all of the Top. So Andy, aside from The Cure, is mostly just do session work as drumming, and has popped up on a lot of, associated with a lot of bands, but isn't on many records. I think he's more of like the touring drummer they would get. There's a cool clip of him in '87 playing with Iggy Pop, doing that Real Wild Child song. So that's kind of cool just to see a Cure dude playing with Iggy Pop. So we'll post a video of that if I can track it back down again. And apparently he's doing a lot of electronic kind of stuff too. I briefly looked at a YouTube page that he has that, from what I can tell, is straight up him. It's called Front and Center, and it sounds like he's doing some kind of electronic stuff mixed in with beats and stuff, but pretty cool and different. So none of it totally grabbed me, but it's not really my thing. But worth checking out. Front and Center, Andy's electronic stuff. And like I said, he played on The Glove pre-Top too. So listen back to that for him. And aside from that, yeah, no real huge scoop that I found. So if anybody else is more aware of anything else, let me know. But he was connected through the next member we'll talk about, who had a lot of weird spin-offs, is Phil Thornley. This is all around that Top era too. Phil Thornley, if you aren't familiar with him, producer guy mostly, studio dude, mixer, producer. He produced Pornography, technically, all him, and had to have been like him and Robert, but I think he might be fully credited for Pornography. And so then he eventually took over in the Top playing bass while Simon was out. So that's kind of his most obvious thing. And on the tour for the Top played bass. But he's, just basically a main studio dude. But, and he had his associations with the Thompson Twins, which is a huge crossover for The Cure. Because that, I believe, and I might be slightly wrong here, but it seems a little too much coincidence, is how he brought in Boris. Had played with some Thompson Twins stuff, and he brought Boris in to fill in for Andy by the end of the Top, and that's how we got Boris. And I believe Roger O'Donnell, too, came from that connection. So pretty key that he's the man that knows some people. And but aside from his producing work, which he did produce some cool stuff, and pretty sure with the Thompson Twins he produced or at least mixed, like Into the Gap was like their big one with like Hold Me Now and Doctor and all that. So he's behind all that stuff. He's a big behind the scenes man and had a lot of success writing that I was I knew he had written Torn, which was funny, the Natalie Imbruglia song from like, when was that, early 2000s I guess. You know it if you heard it, but then finding that wasn't even the original version. He had written the song, and either an artist or a band, Edna Swap, I don't know if I'm mispronouncing that too, I was able to track that down, and here's a little snippet. If you aren't familiar with the song, you'll totally recognize it as soon as you hear it, but this is the first incarnation of this song, Torn, written by Phil Thornley. There you go. Remember that one? Love it or hate it. I think you have to admit the Natalie Imbruglia one was a little better for a pop hit. But it doesn't stop there. I always chuckled at that. I was like, wow, Phil Thornley was like behind this pop hit. And apparently that wasn't the only one. There's some band, I'm assuming like British, it was UK 3 number one hits he wrote for this Pixie Lot. It's like this just straight up girl pop singer, and Pixie Lot. And 3 number one hits he wrote, or co-wrote at least. I don't know if he was the full writer for all these, but definitely in the co-writing for these 3 number one hits. He's got Robert Smith beat. But for what it's worth, you hear these songs though, I mean, they're so poppy. I'll put a video up. Couldn't even try to find an actual MP3, but they're all like busted on the dance floor kind of stuff, and just trying to picture anybody that had any association with The Cure writing something like this is pretty ridiculous. But hey man, whatever works, right? 3 number one hits. Give them what they want. But Pixie Lot, I don't know. Should I know who this is? I was totally surprised. I'd never heard of this person. But, Pixie Lot. All right, let's get serious now. Let's get to the heavy hitters of The Cure. Some of the members that we all hold dear in our hearts still. And one of those is definitely Boris Williams, the drummer for The Cure during the peak of their mainstream success, I would say. It's very safe to say. Technically in the band late 84 through 94, so a 10-year chunk, and played on the albums Head on the Door, Kiss Me, Disintegration, Wish. So if you're going to pick 4 albums to play on, that's a pretty solid list. But he's weird where he kind of diverts from the theme of this, where it's not so much a lot of actual side projects that he was just working on some vision or something, but just a lot of stuff he played on before and during and after The Cure, and some of it more obvious than others. But let's try to go in order. 1985, so right around the same time he joined The Cure, I found him being credited to this album Strawberry Switchblades. I hadn't heard about these guys, and it's pretty cool, just like female vocal pop band. Just alternative enough where it felt cool, but was still pretty poppy. It's hard to say. I couldn't really find much scoop on them, like what the connection was, or even which songs, or if it was the full album. So if anybody's got some more inside scoop on them, I'd love to hear it. But it was pretty cool, listenable. I'll play you a quick snippet. So there you go. Like I said, if I had to choose in 1985 if I should stick with The Cure or this, probably safe to go with The Cure at that point. But so more prominently, he'd just be the main drummer for Cure for a good run there. Next notable thing that happens is in the Prayer Tour for Disintegration, 1989. This band, Shelley and Orphan, who's led by a female vocalist named Caroline Crawley, who's pretty widely known and loved amongst the Cure community. I was kind of in the dark by this because I didn't see that tour, so I think a lot of you guys out there probably even saw this band open for the Cure, and then they're just kind of a ton of albums after that. But apparently they had this album beforehand, Century Flower, that the Cure really loved, and had them open up on the tour for Prayer Tour. Boris hits it off with Caroline Crawley, and they start dating. So there's the connection there. And then they put out an album called Humroot in 92 that Boris actually plays on. So this is around Wish era too. So Boris plays on this album Humroot, which is pretty cool and was surprisingly I got into. It's definitely like an early 90s. I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a lot of like percussion going on, almost like kind of music-wise in the vein of like a more British 10,000 Maniacs or something. But her vocals are really cool. Some of the songs don't really totally blow me away, just writing-wise. I think if you listen to them more, they kind of reel you in. And it's funny, I never found any other associations, so I might be nuts with this, but I thought her voice was very reminiscent of the Sundays. Remember the Sundays? Here's where the story ends and all that. So I thought her vocals were right along those times, and Sundays were along this time too. So I don't know if they hung out or had any connection or what. Speculation there. But yeah, she's pretty cool. And so they put out that Humroot album, which of the ones I listened to associated with Caroline Crawley, I think I kind of like that one the best. Post Cure at this point for Boris. He leaves in 94. Still dating Caroline Crawley as far as I know. And they put out an album. This is a whole new project at this point called Babacar. I might be pronouncing it wrong. Babacar is how I'm going to say it, so sorry. So yeah, they put that out, and that's kind of more of an actual band with Boris and other members there. And Poro actually plays guitar on a few of the songs on that too, so he's featured there. And it's, this one definitely gets more 90s, almost has like a world beat feel to it or something. Not so much because it's still very like, alternative sounding, and her vocals save it. But yeah, it's cool. It's one of those ones, if you listen to it and you really pick out that it's a Boris beat, it makes you like it a little bit more. But to be 100% honest, if I heard it and didn't have any Cure association whatsoever to it, I probably wouldn't really enjoy it that much. But did not like it. So you be the judge. You check it out. Here's a song from Babacar. And out of timeline-wise, but worth noting, I believe I mentioned it in another episode, I was combing around through some Discog stuff and found that Boris actually played drums on Ian McCullough's solo album Candleland too, which is the album I always held dear to my heart. For whatever reason, I picked it up when I was a kid when it came out and just loved it. Even amongst Echo and the Bunnymen fans, for some reason, people don't really seem to give that album the praise that I think it deserves. I think it's a really cool album, and he plays on two of my favorite songs on it, White Hotel and Proud to Fall. And those are Boris beats, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, aside from that, there's some other little sprinkled things here and there that Boris did, but I think it was mainly with Caroline Crawley that he did most of his side project work and played with. And sadly, also, she passed away fairly recently, just last year, I believe it was. And so yeah, I know a lot of Cure fans probably really hold this band and the singer in particular dear to their heart. Because they probably saw her on that tour, and it all makes sense. But yeah, sorry to hear that. Not sure where she was with Boris at this point. But none of my business. It's none of my business. Anyway, let's move on to another heavy hitter of the Cure, Poro. I'll say both just because it crosses over from the past into the present. But Pearl, the guitarist for the Cure, again comes in right on when the Cure's hitting their big mainstream stride of what a lot of people would consider their biggest blockbuster albums there, coming in on the top, but playing through Head on the Door, Kiss Me, Disintegration, and then also through Wish, and departing around the same time as Boris, right after Wish there. And yeah, there's not too much. The most obvious side projects for Pearl were shortly after leaving the Cure, so it was pretty soon after that, playing with Plant and Page, which I forgot to mention on the covers episode, but luckily Christine threw it out there, the Lullaby cover that was also part of their set. And but I mean, how cool for Pearl to be playing with, obviously two huge idols and being a part of that. Like I said in the previous episode too, for whatever reason, I'm not a Led Zeppelin fan. I can't really say I enjoy any part of their music. I mean, the music's cool. It's the vocals that gets me. But yeah, sorry guys, I'm just So I didn't even really listen to these albums much to give the guitar work a chance. But apparently plays on No Quarter and Dreamland, which I've heard and not really enjoyed. But amazing musicians. You can't even try to knock any of those guys, right? So just not my thing. But so that was the main live, and I guess a little bit on the recordings for those for Pearl. But it's been pretty clear, I think, that the art is the main thing from pretty much about that point on. Popping back into the Cure 2008 for 413 Dream, which is an album we'll get to, and I definitely think it has some really strong positive parts to it. Full cohesive album. It's not my top 5 by any means, but there's a lot that I love on that record for sure. And for nothing else, the artwork is totally amazing again, so that was cool. Hopefully Pearl will continue to do some Cure art, even if any new stuff comes out ever, and not a part of the band, then why not? But like we said with Lowell, I guess the illustrations, Pearl's doing the illustrations for this graphic novel, and that's pretty cool. Did the cover art for the actual Lowell book, Cured, so that's cool. And then one that I did find that was fairly recent was this trip hop. People were calling it trip hop. I don't even know if it would count as that category wise, but another one that I'm gonna butcher the name on, Gonjasufi. Not sure, Gonjasufi, we'll say. Yeah, so I don't know. It's this album called Callous, and 4 songs Pearl plays on, and it's all over the place. This thing is weird as hell. So here's a song off of Callous. So there you go. See what I mean? For nothing else, Pearl always gets the award and top points for ex-Cure members for doing something you would never expect, whether playing with Plant and Page or just doing some crazy art stuff. That's pretty rad. Definitely nothing I would just put on and enjoy listening to very frequently, but at least it's different, and not afraid to take chances, that one. So let's move on to a current member, still officially with The Cure for now. This is the most reoccurring in and out member of The Cure is Roger O'Donnell on keys. And it's jotted down. 87, originally joined the band. What I believe is another pull from the Thompson Twins touring lineup. But 87 through 89 through Disintegration, and then departed for a good chunk of years there until 1996 for Wild Mood Swings came back, and through 2005 after the self-titled album and tour, departed again, then came back 2011 as a touring member of The Cure. There has been no new material since then, but as of now, sounds like Roger would be a part of that, and hopefully everybody's happy again. Don't really want to go into why any of these people leave and come back. Who knows? And he's an interesting member and dynamic of The Cure, and of these, for the sake of the topic of this show, probably the most prominent side project dude. He's had solo stuff going on pretty consistently from even being in The Cure and doing a whole heap of solo stuff is out there. There's an album called, the ones that I looked at the closest were the ones I had and pieces of. Truth in Me is an album, came out in 2006. So that was on the heels of another Cure break there. And Songs from the Silver Box in 2009. Love and Other Tragedies 2015. I think that was mostly a live thing too, that he did some performances. And I had something called Quieter Trees that I got somewhere that I'm not even sure where that fits in the timeline, but most of it is very keyboard instrumental. Again, probably up there with Pearl, like experimental factor. It's definitely different, but mostly different in the sense that it's compositions and instrumental recordings. Some of them have, like on Truth in Me, has guest vocals and stuff, and some of those work really cool, and definitely just amazing playing, musicianship, very pleasant sounding. Hard to throw it on a lot unless I was just kind of chilling and wanted some good background music, as far as my taste. But yeah, musicianship, this dude's all over the place. It's up there with Pearl. It's probably the two main, like, amazing just musicianship people in the Cure, almost to the point where they're too good at times. At a fault, if you're going to fault anything, it would be that they are playing too much and sounds too good when they need to be plucking with one finger or something. But yeah, it seems like that kind of thing. At times it just sounds like a soundtrack or something. So it's a little hard to just dig into that. But cool use of, like, keyboards and technology, of course. He seems really hip and knowledgeable of that stuff. So great use of Moog keyboards and such here in Asheville, where Moog keyboards are based out of. He's been on the documentaries and a huge supporter of a lot of their keyboards over the years. So that's cool to just hear, and that kind of almost local connection for us here in Asheville. But yeah, so he's been cranking them out and seems happy doing that. There's some cool clips. You can find tons of stuff on YouTube of just live stuff and little features that they've done where they show his work and show him working on it in the studio and such. So So yeah, if you're into more instrumental compositions and great use of keyboards, all the things you would expect from a Roger O'Donnell solo album, you probably will love these recordings. So go check them out if you haven't. Also worth noting, apparently an executive producer on the upcoming film England Is Mine, the Morrissey biopic, which I've seen some people online getting a little pissy about. They're like, how could someone from The Cure have anything to do with Morrissey? Screw this. But I mean, it's like, what? Really? Who cares? But as far as I know, that's the first thing he's been in the movie industry on. So that's kind of cool, I guess. And if you can, why not? A little funny and strange that it does just happen to be a Morrissey movie that is going on. But I'm just more. I'm a Morrissey fan, and I'm curious to see what the hell this movie's gonna be like. Just seems like these things are always a bad idea, but who knows? Maybe they'll do it right, and everybody will win in the end. So there you go, getting into the biz, Roger O'Donnell. So let's move on to Jason Cooper, the current drummer of The Cure. Joined in 95. Like I said earlier, Boris Williams was pretty loved in the Cure family and community there. So a lot of flack this guy took when he came on. I remember just reading constantly of anyone trying to fill in the shoes of a Cure member that's left. This has probably been the biggest challenge for a lot of people going all the way back to 95. I would like to think by now everyone's just kind of shut up and embraced the fact that this guy's amazing and has done a wonderful job since day one with The Cure. I think he's a great drummer, very, probably a little more technical maybe than Boris in a sense. Donald has talked about it when we saw him live and such, and more just different styles, but this guy is very adaptable, and he put on a lot of the recordings. It's, he nails it. There's no real obvious difference in the songs as far as I can tell, and really just, being able to fill all those shoes and keep those styles, it'd been very easy for him to play some of the old low beats, but then like, I'm gonna spruce it up a little bit, and like, and to a certain degree, you wouldn't even blame him for doing that, but the fact that he keeps it exactly how it should sound, and adds his style and talent to it in a very very classy way. I guess that's a good way to put it, is that he has great touch and style, that he's able to take the classics and really embrace them. And all the new stuff, dude can rock. He can play the slow ones. He doesn't have any weak spots as far as I've ever heard. But aside from just praising him, didn't really have too much as far as side projects or just other stuff he's worked on aside from The Cure. So I think he's just happy to be in that position, and I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing. So him in particular, if anybody knows of anything that I didn't discover, let me know. I saw that also, speaking of film industry stuff, he did some composing apparently for a horror movie called From Within. I didn't get a chance to track down anything about this movie, or definitely not the soundtrack or the score, but apparently did something for that. But that was really the only thing that kind of popped up when I was trying to comb through what this dude works on in between these droughts with The Cure. So I don't know, he's probably just got to work on knowing the drum beats to like 500 songs, so maybe that's enough to keep him busy. So keep at it, Jason. Great work. We love you here at the Holy Hour. So all right, that brings us to the end. We've got our newest official member. He's got to be considered an official member at this point, Reeves. So Reeves on guitar has only been a touring member of The Cure at this point, other than playing on Wrong Number years before even. And he seems to really fit in this last tour in particular. Everybody's really embraced him a lot more, I think, and kind of welcomed him as an official Cure guy. So I would think that if they do another album, he would be on there somewhere. And I'm cool with him. I think it's as they get older and everything, your initials like, who's this guy? He's an American, which is funny because you kind of like initially forget that almost even, but the dude's an American. Who let this older American dude into The Cure, But then it's like, wait, they're all older now, and it doesn't matter if he's an American. He's an amazing guitarist, and he has this Bowie connection, of course. He, like the history there with Tim Machine and stuff pre-Cure. And the quick version, I guess he met Robert while Robert was playing with the Bowie birthday celebration thing that we've all seen on YouTube, and hit it off well, apparently. And he played on Wrong Number just as like a guest appearance. And then, I'm not even sure when he officially started touring with The Cure, but it must have been post 413, the Dream Tour there. So, fairly recently, but really, with the amount of songs that they learned, like Jason, he got his hands full doing that. But he's currently on tour too, so he's the most relevant as far as side projects, doing his own thing. And a lot of the Cure people I'm seeing on social media have gone out to the shows and seen his live performances. He tours his imaginary friends. Is this got to be a nod to The Cure too, right? So he's been playing some cool venues. It's hard to say on the clips. I would go if he came close enough here. I wouldn't travel huge distances to go, but seems very like classic rocky, like stuff I've heard. I'm in like, but I mean, just seeing him play guitar, he's an amazing guitarist. If nothing else, it'd be fun just to watch him play guitar. And but yeah, pretty cool. And I would love to just see what the crowds are like. Anybody that's been to any of these shows, definitely hit us up on these threads and let us know. What was it, a lot of Cure fans? Does he have like a huge following of just his own, I wonder? But the rest of the band just seems like dudes rocking, like they just seem like kind of like a dudes rocking in the garage kind of band or something. But he's got like 5 solo albums. I was kind of running out of time to research all these, so I didn't really pick those apart, of course, the most obvious is the song Yesterday's Gone, which is on his album Ulysses. It came out in like 2000, so that's even pretty old at this point. But that's the one that Robert sings on, and it's a really cool song. And from what I heard, is a pretty good staple of his live set. I think he's always playing it, but it's a cool song. I really like Yesterday's Gone. If you haven't heard that, check that out. But yeah, he's got to have tons of stuff, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, from what I heard of the style, it's just not really my thing. But who knows? But I think you got to respect the guy and for what he's done with The Cure on this last tour in particular. And he's really stepped it up, plays it. There's only a couple songs I feel like you can even really pick out his style and like it or not. They're just a little different than how you're normally hearing the songs or the solos. It's usually just the solos, but he's taking on the other songs very with respect, and again, like Jason, not like changing it up just because he's got a different style, so I think it's all pretty cool. And I don't know, I guess that wraps up where people are on The Cure. And I'm sure I missed something or got something out of line, or a good chance you just misunderstood me because I'm mumbling and I've literally been talking for an hour straight. You try it sometime. You're going to say some shit that doesn't make sense. Trust me. I'd recommend some of these, some of them not. So feel free to go over to the Facebook page and, I'll try to post as many that I talked about as possible, and you can hear for yourself if you haven't checked them out in detail. Otherwise, we'll just keep hoping for some new Cure material so we won't have to worry about these damn side projects or anything else going on in the Cure world. But until then, this is what we got to fill our new music urges. Robert, if I'm not sure when these will come out, but we're doing a glove episode, and where Dawn and I are going to talk about the glove, and that's pretty much the only real Robert side project too, so that's kind of strange. He's done his one-off collaborations and covers and stuff here and there over the years, but it's strange that there's only been one side project that he's done, and that was the glove way back when, 1983. Good God, it's been forever. So he should do a side project thing if he's... Come on, Robert. I'm sure he's got things that keep him busy. But yeah, so Instagram, the Holy Hour Podcast is on Instagram. Go out there. You can find some feelers of upcoming episodes. We haven't thrown any out in a while, but we'll try to get back to that. But always feel free to email us like Matt did at the top of this episode. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your thoughts on Perry. And thanks so much to you guys for listening. Be sure to drop me an email if you do have a huge critique or anything about this episode or others in particular, or just want to say hi at gavinconner@gmail.com. And we'll catch you soon. Be sure to check out Arusha's upcoming project, Cure Fan Documentary, Push, where you can donate or buy some new merch over at mixedupgifts.com to help out with the production of that film. And to all our good listeners and friends out there, thanks so much. We'll catch you in a couple weeks with a new topic. And until then, go listen to some side projects. Talk hard.
Hello, this is Jason Cooper. You're listening to the Holy Hour Podcast.